The air in Monroe always smelled like old leaves in October, like time had folded in on itself and left behind only whispers. The Warren house sat at the edge of the woods, cloaked in ivy and secrets, its windows watching like silent eyes. Lorraine Warren, now in her 80s, had not opened the occult museum in over a year. Since Ed's passing, the artifacts remained locked in darkness, and the house had grown quiet. Too quiet. Only the ticking of an old grandfather clock kept her company during the long evenings. But last Monday something changed. It started with the mirror, the one Ed warned her never to look into after dark. It had been a gift, or maybe a cursed donation from one of their oldest cases. A tall gilded mirror with a jagged crack in the corner and a coldness that never left the glass. That night, while dusting the hallway, Lorraine passed by it. She saw her reflection, and something else. A man. Not just any man, Ed. He stood behind her, smiling gently, the way he used to on slow Sunday mornings. But when she turned around, there was only the air. Still. Empty. She tried to dismiss it. Grief plays strange tricks, she thought. But when the mirror fogged from the inside the next morning, and words slowly appeared in the mist, "I never left," she knew this wasn't just memory. Something in the Warren house had awakened, and it remembered everything. Lorraine Warren had always believed in spirits, not just because she'd seen them, but because they had followed her, whispered her name in hotel rooms, tugged at her sleeves in churches, and waited for her in dreams. But after Ed passed, she had tried to retreat, to leave the investigations, the museum, the voices behind. The house, however, did not agree. The Warren residence was more than just a home. It was a monument to decades of supernatural encounters, an archive of the world's darkest relics. The occult museum in the basement held hundreds of items: a music box that played by itself, a doll sealed behind glass, an old wedding veil that smelled of fire, and the mirror. Always the mirror. Ed had once said, "It doesn't show you your reflection, it shows you your attachment." Lorraine had never asked what he meant by that. Now she thought she understood. In the days after the mirror incident, small things began to happen. Footsteps on the stairs when no one was home. A cold breeze sweeping through the hall even when the windows were shut. Ed's favorite record, Moonlight Serenade, started playing by itself at night. First faintly, then louder. At first, she welcomed it. She even spoke to the mirror once. "Is it really you?" she asked. Nothing replied. But that night, the smell of Ed's cologne drifted into her bedroom. She began seeing him more often, in reflections, in the corner of her eye, in old photographs that seemed subtly changed. In one photo of their anniversary, Ed's hand had moved. It now rested gently on her shoulder. It hadn't been there before, unsure whether she was being haunted or comforted. Lorraine called in Daniel, a younger investigator who had worked with them once in his early years. He arrived the next morning, bringing along digital voice recorders, EMF sensors, and a heavy silence. "Are you ready for what this could mean?" he asked her gently. Lorraine nodded. "I think Ed's trying to tell me something." Daniel's brow furrowed. "Or something wants you to think he is." Daniel stayed in the guest room downstairs. The first night, nothing happened. But the second night, at exactly 3:07 a.m., the EMF meter in the museum spiked to red. The recorder picked up a soft male voice, faint as a sigh. "She's mine." Daniel played it for Lorraine over breakfast. Her hands trembled as she stirred sugar into her tea. "That's not Ed's voice," she said. "No, it isn't." The mirror had begun to fog every morning now. Sometimes it left behind words, "I miss you. Let me in. Look deeper." Daniel placed salt around the mirror and brought in a priest. The priest prayed. The mirror stayed quiet for 3 days. Then, on the 4th, Lorraine found a note under her pillow. It was written in Ed's handwriting, but Ed had been buried with that pen. The message read, "He is not me." Lorraine began to dream again. Dark dreams. Dreams of the mirror showing her other versions of her life. Ones where Ed died earlier. Ones where she opened the museum to the public. Ones where she herself never made it past 50. In one dream, she saw herself trapped behind the glass, screaming silently as a twisted version of Ed smiled from the other side. She woke with scratches on her arms. Daniel checked the security footage. At 2:59 a.m., the camera aimed at the mirror glitched for exactly 11 seconds. When the footage resumed, Lorraine was standing in front of it, eyes closed, as if in a trance. She had no memory of this. Daniel was ready to destroy the mirror. Lorraine begged him not to. "Ed is in there," she whispered. "But so is something else." Daniel looked at her with the fear of a man who'd seen too much too young. "That's exactly what I'm afraid of." The crack in the mirror stayed. Thin, as a vein, it ran from the top left corner to the bottom edge like a scar on its surface. Lorraine found herself staring into it every day now, drawn to it like a moth to a quiet flame. Daniel called it mirror obsession. He warned her about it. Said people under spiritual influence often became emotionally attached to haunted objects, especially ones tied to loved ones they'd lost. But Lorraine wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She began talking to the mirror, only when no one was around. Little things like, "I miss you. Do you remember the case in Monroe? You always sat in that chair right next to the lamp." And the mirror responded in its own way. Not with words, not always, but with presence. Then one afternoon, she found a cup of tea on the kitchen counter, still warm. She hadn't made it. That night, Daniel stayed over. He installed a motion-activated camera in the museum and kept the spirit box running on low volume, recording everything. Just after 2 a.m., Lorraine sat upright in bed. Something was calling her. A whisper, faint as wind, brushing her ear. "Lorraine?" She walked barefoot to the museum, wrapped in her old robe. The house didn't creak this time. It welcomed her, like it wanted her to go. The door to the museum was open. The mirror glowed faintly in the dark. She stepped closer and saw not her own face, but Ed's. He was sitting in the rocking chair in the reflection, smiling, alive. She touched the glass. It was warm. "I found a way," the reflection whispered. Her lips trembled. "Is it really you? You called me back. We can be together now. Just step through." The room around her dimmed. The air thickened. Her heart raced, but her body remained calm, almost hypnotized. Behind her, the door creaked. Daniel was there. "Lorraine, don't." She didn't turn around. Her hand was already halfway into the glass. "It's him," she whispered. Daniel stepped forward. "No, it's not." The spirit box behind him screeched with static, then a low growl. "She's mine now." Suddenly the reflection changed. It wasn't Ed anymore. It was something wearing his face, its smile too wide, its eyes too empty. Daniel rushed forward and grabbed her shoulders, pulling her back. The mirror screamed. Not shattered, but screamed. A shrill, soul-deep sound that filled the room with vibrating agony. And then, silence. The mirror went black. Lorraine collapsed into Daniel's arms. She woke the next morning in her bed. She walked to the museum alone. The mirror was still there, but her reflection was the only thing in it now. The crack had vanished, and on the floor below it was a photograph, an old one, Ed and Lorraine, standing in front of the museum. But in this version, only Lorraine was smiling. Ed's face had been scribbled out by something that looked like long black fingernails. In the days that followed, Lorraine stayed away from the museum. She closed the door, locked it, draped a cloth over the mirror, and placed a crucifix in front of it. Daniel suggested moving the object to a safer location, but Lorraine refused. "It belongs here," she said quietly. And he might still be listening. They never spoke about that night in full detail. Daniel returned once more with a second priest who prayed over every corner of the museum. The energy in the house lightened, but something in the air remained unchanged. Lorraine took comfort in routine, watering the plants, listening to the old wind chimes, sitting by the window where Ed used to sit. Sometimes she'd speak to the empty room, but occasionally, the mirror would fog again. Just a slow mist along the glass, like breath from the other side. And when it did, she would whisper, "I know you're still there, but I can't follow." One morning, she woke to find a rose on her nightstand, its stem slightly bent, just the way Ed used to pick them. Lorraine smiled and let the silence wrap around her like a blanket. The record player began to hum, and in the museum, behind a cloth and crucifix, the mirror remained, waiting, always waiting. Even in death, love leaves behind a shadow, and sometimes it learns how to whisper back.